Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The rain-slicked streets glistened under the glow of street lamps as Lorenzo hurried along the sidewalk, his head bent against the drizzle. He clutched a bouquet of flowers tightly, shielding them from the elements as best he could. The anticipation of seeing Zoe, his girlfriend, quickened his steps despite the dreary weather. A sudden roar of an engine broke through the patter of raindrops. Before Lorenzo could react, a car sped past, its tires cutting through a deep puddle at the curb. A wave of dirty water arced through the air, drenching Lorenzo from head to toe. "Hey! Watch where you're going!" he shouted after the retreating taillights, but his words were lost in the night air. Lorenzo stood there, sputtering and dripping. His carefully chosen outfit, a crisp button-down shirt and tailored slacks, now clung to his body, completely soaked. The flowers, miraculously, had escaped the worst of it, but a few drooping petals betrayed their ordeal. With a heavy sigh, Lorenzo checked his watch. He was already running late for his date with Zoe. There was no time to go home and change. Resigned to his fate, he squelched onward, leaving a trail of wet footprints in his wake. By the time he reached Zoe's apartment building, Lorenzo was thoroughly miserable. His shoes made an unpleasant squishing sound with each step, and his shirt had become nearly transparent, plastered against his skin. He pressed the buzzer for Zoe's apartment, shifting uncomfortably as he waited. "Hello?" Zoe's voice crackled through the intercom.
"It's me,"
Lorenzo replied, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice.
"Can you let me up?"
The door buzzed, granting him entry. Lorenzo trudged up the stairs, leaving damp footprints on each step. He knocked on Zoe's door, bracing himself for her reaction. The door swung open, revealing Zoe's warm smile. Her expression quickly shifted to one of concern as she took in Lorenzo's bedraggled appearance. "Oh my God, what happened to you?" Zoe exclaimed, ushering him inside. Lorenzo stepped into the warmth of the apartment, careful not to drip too much on the floor.
"A car decided to give me an impromptu shower," he explained ruefully. "I'm sorry I'm late. And, well, sorry I'm such a mess."
Zoe's eyes softened with sympathy. She took the slightly wilted bouquet from his hands, setting it aside. "Don't worry about it. Let's get you dried off." She disappeared into the bathroom, returning moments later with a fluffy towel. Lorenzo gratefully accepted it, patting his face and hair dry.
"I don't suppose you have any spare clothes I could borrow?"
he asked, half jokingly. "I'd rather not spend the evening in these wet things." Zoe bit her lip, considering. "Well, I might have something, but—" She trailed off, looking uncertain. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow.
"But what?"
"I don't think any of my ex-boyfriend's clothes would fit you," Zoe admitted. "You're taller than most of them were."
"Oh,"
Lorenzo said, trying to hide his disappointment. He hadn't realized she still kept clothes from her exes, but he pushed the thought aside. It wasn't important right now. Zoe's eyes lit up suddenly. "Wait, I have an idea. It's a bit unconventional, but how do you feel about wearing some of my clothes?" Lorenzo blinked, taken aback by the suggestion.
"Your clothes? I don't know, Zoe. I'm not sure they'd fit me."
"We're not that different in size," Zoe insisted. "And I have some looser-fitting things that might work. It's better than staying in those wet clothes, right?" Lorenzo hesitated, glancing down at his sodden outfit. The thought of spending the entire evening in damp, chafing clothes was decidedly unappealing. Still, the idea of wearing women's clothing made him feel strange. Uncomfortable, yes, but also something else he couldn't quite define.
I guess you're right, he conceded, finally. If you're sure you don't mind.
Zoe smiled reassuringly. Of course not. Wait here, I'll find something. She disappeared into her bedroom, leaving Lorenzo alone with his thoughts. He shifted from foot to foot, acutely aware of the puddle forming beneath him. The situation felt surreal, like something out of a sitcom. Here he was, standing in his girlfriend's apartment, about to wear her clothes. It wasn't how he'd envisioned their evening going. A few minutes later, Zoe emerged with a small pile of clothing in her arms. Here, she said, holding them out to Lorenzo. I think these might work. The jeans are a bit long on me, so they should fit you okay. And this blouse is pretty stretchy. Lorenzo took the clothes, eyeing them warily. The jeans looked fairly standard, a dark wash denim that didn't scream women's clothing too loudly. The blouse, however, was undeniably feminine, a soft, flowing fabric in a pale blue color, with delicate buttons down the front.
I'm not sure about this,
Lorenzo said, his voice uncertain. Zoe placed a gentle hand on his arm. Just try them on.
If you're really uncomfortable, we can figure something else out. But you need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch a cold.
Lorenzo nodded, resigned.
All right. Where should I change?
You can use my bedroom, Zoe offered. Take your time. I'll make us some tea while you get dressed. Lorenzo retreated to Zoe's bedroom, closing the door behind him. He set the dry clothes on the bed and began peeling off his wet garments, shivering as the cool air hit his damp skin. He dried himself off as best he could with the towel Zoe had given him earlier. Finally, he turned his attention to the borrowed clothes. The jeans went on first, and to his surprise, they fit reasonably well. They were snugger than he was used to, hugging his hips and thighs in a way his usual pants didn't. But they weren't uncomfortable. The blouse was a different matter. Lorenzo held it up, studying it with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The fabric was silky against his fingers, lighter and softer than any of his own shirts. He slipped it on, fumbling slightly with the unfamiliar buttons. Once it was on, Lorenzo turned to look at himself in Zoe's full-length mirror. The sight that greeted him was startling. The blouse draped over his torso in a way that was entirely new to him. It skimmed his body, hinting at curves he'd never noticed before. The color brought out the warmth in his skin tone, and the V-neck showed off his collarbones in a way that was almost pretty. Lorenzo stood there, transfixed by his reflection. He ran his hands down the sides of the blouse, marveling at the sensation of the soft fabric against his skin. It felt nice, really nice, actually. There was something about the way the clothes fit and felt that stirred something deep inside him, a feeling he couldn't quite name, but that resonated in a profound way. A knock at the door startled him out of his reverie. "Lorenzo? Are you okay in there?" Zoe's voice called.
Yeah,
he replied, his voice cracking slightly.
I'm coming out now.
Taking a deep breath, Lorenzo opened the door and stepped out into the living room. Zoe was waiting for him, 2 steaming mugs of tea on the coffee table in front of her. Her eyes widened as she took in his appearance. "Wow," she breathed. "Lorenzo, you look amazing." Lorenzo felt a blush creep up his cheeks.
Really? It doesn't look weird?
Zoe shook her head emphatically. "Not at all. It suits you, actually. Come here, Let me get a better look. She stood up, circling around Lorenzo as he stood awkwardly in the middle of the room. Her gaze was appreciative, not mocking, which helped ease some of Lorenzo's tension. You know, Zoe said with a playful smile, we could almost pass as twins now. Well, if I had your height anyway. Lorenzo let out a surprised laugh. I don't know about that, but thanks. For the clothes, I mean, and for not making this weird. Zoe reached out, taking his hand in hers. Of course. That's what partners are for, right? Supporting each other, even in unexpected situations. They settled onto the couch, sipping their tea and chatting. As the evening wore on, Lorenzo found himself relaxing more and more. The initial strangeness of wearing Zoe's clothes faded, replaced by an unexpected sense of comfort. He caught himself absently running his fingers along the soft fabric of the blouse, enjoying the sensation. Later that night, as Lorenzo prepared to leave, he found himself reluctant to change back into his own clothes, which were still damp and cold.
You can keep those on if you want,
Zoe offered, noticing his hesitation.
Just bring them back next time you come over.
Lorenzo nodded, grateful for the suggestion.
Thanks. I will.
As he walked home that night, Lorenzo couldn't shake the lingering feelings the experience had stirred up. The gentle sway of the blouse as he moved, the snug fit of the jeans. It all felt so different from what he was used to, yet somehow right. Over the next few weeks, Lorenzo found himself thinking about that night more and more. He'd returned Zoe's clothes, freshly washed, but the memory of how they'd felt stayed with him. He caught himself eyeing the women's section in stores, wondering what it would be like to try on more clothes like that. One day, unable to resist any longer, Lorenzo found himself in a small boutique during his lunch break. His heart raced as he browsed through racks of blouses and dresses, feeling both exhilarated and terrified.
Can I help you find anything?
A friendly sales assistant asked, approaching him. Lorenzo jumped, feeling caught.
Oh, I'm just looking,
he stammered. The assistant smiled warmly.
No problem. Let me know if you need any help. We have a great selection of sizes, and our fitting rooms are very private if you'd like to try anything on.
Lorenzo nodded, grateful for the lack of judgment in her tone. After a few more minutes of internal debate, he selected a simple black dress and a flowy top similar to the one he'd borrowed from Zoe. In the privacy of the fitting room, Lorenzo's hands shook as he changed into the dress. As the fabric settled around him, he felt a rush of something. Relief? Excitement? He wasn't sure. But when he looked in the mirror, the person staring back at him felt more right than he'd ever felt before. That night, Lorenzo invited Zoe over to his apartment. His heart pounded as he waited for her arrival, the shopping bag from the boutique sitting on his coffee table like a confession. When Zoe arrived, Lorenzo took a deep breath.
There's something I need to talk to you about,
he said, his voice trembling slightly. Zoe's brow furrowed with concern. What is it? Is everything okay? Lorenzo nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again.
Yes. No, I don't know. Ever since that night I wore your clothes, I can't stop thinking about it, about how it felt. And I think maybe...
He trailed off, unsure how to continue. Zoe reached out, taking his hand in hers.
It's okay, she said softly. Whatever it is, you can tell me.
Lorenzo squeezed her hand gratefully.
I think I might be transgender,
he whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating as they left his lips. Zoe's eyes widened, but her grip on Lorenzo's hand didn't waver. "Oh," she said softly. "How long have you been feeling this way?"
"I'm not sure," Lorenzo admitted. "I think maybe I've always felt different, but I didn't have the words for it. Wearing your clothes that night, it was like something clicked into place, like I finally saw a version of myself that made sense."
Zoe nodded, processing this information. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "That must have been really scary." Lorenzo felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes.
"You're not upset?"
"Of course not," Zoe assured him. "I love you. This doesn't change that. It might change some things about our relationship, but we'll figure that out together, okay?" Relief washed over Lorenzo, and he pulled Zoe into a tight hug.
"Thank you,"
he murmured into her hair. As they pulled apart, Lorenzo glanced at the shopping bag on the table.
I bought some clothes today," he admitted.
Would you like to see?" Zoe smiled encouragingly. "I'd love to." Lorenzo retrieved the bag, pulling out the dress and top he'd purchased. Zoe's eyes lit up as she examined them. "These are beautiful," she said. "Do you want to try them on?" Lorenzo nodded, suddenly shy. He retreated to his bedroom to change, emerging a few minutes later in the black dress. It hugged his body in a way that felt both foreign and wonderfully familiar. Zoe's face broke into a wide smile. "You look amazing," she said sincerely. "How do you feel?" Lorenzo took a deep breath, considering the question.
"I feel like me,"
he said finally.
"More me than I've ever felt before."
Over the next few months, Lorenzo, who soon chose the name Laura, began the process of transitioning. It wasn't easy. There were difficult conversations with family and friends, moments of doubt and fear, but through it all, Zoe remained a constant source of support and love. Laura started hormone therapy, watching with a mixture of excitement and trepidation as her body slowly began to change. She grew out her hair, experimenting with different styles. Shopping for clothes became an adventure rather than a chore, as she discovered her personal style. There were challenges, of course. Laura faced discrimination at work, eventually deciding to find a new job where she could be open about her identity from the start. She had to navigate the complicated process of legally changing her name and gender marker on official documents. But there were joys, too. The first time a stranger called her ma'am without hesitation. The day she looked in the mirror and truly recognized herself. The moment she realized she could laugh freely without feeling like she was playing a part. Through it all, Zoe was by her side. Their relationship evolved as Laura's transition progressed. There were awkward moments and difficult conversations, but their love for each other never wavered. Zoe helped Laura navigate the intricacies of makeup and hair care, laughing together over botched eyeliner attempts and disastrous home dye jobs. One evening, about a year after Laura had come out, the couple sat curled up on their couch. Laura was wearing a soft sweater dress, her hair falling in gentle waves around her face. Zoe looked at her, eyes full of love and pride. "Do you remember that night?" Zoe asked. "When you got soaked by that car and had to borrow my clothes?" Laura laughed, the sound light and genuine. "How could I forget? It changed everything." Zoe snuggled closer. "I'm so glad it did. I'm so proud of you, Laura, of how far you've come, of how brave you've been." Laura felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. Thank you for standing by me through all of this. Always, Zoe promised, leaning in for a kiss. As their lips met, Laura marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a rain-soaked night and a borrowed blouse to a life lived authentically, with love and support by her side. She'd faced challenges and fears, but she'd also discovered a strength within herself she never knew she possessed. Laura broke the kiss, smiling at Zoe. I love you, she said simply. I love you too, Zoe replied. All of you, always. As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Laura felt a sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead might not always be easy, but she knew she could face whatever came her way. She was finally, truly herself, and she had the love and support to help her navigate this new chapter of her life. The soft glow of the lamp cast a warm light over the room, illuminating the content expressions on both their faces. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, but in that moment, their apartment felt like a sanctuary of understanding and acceptance. Laura's thoughts drifted to the future, the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead. There would be more milestones in her transition, more moments of self-discovery. But she no longer feared them. Instead, she looked forward to each new day, each new experience, with a sense of excitement and possibility. She thought about the little girl she'd always been inside, the one who'd been scared and confused for so long. That little girl was at peace now, finally able to be herself in the world. Laura silently promised her younger self that she would continue to honor her truth, to live authentically, no matter what obstacles she might face. As the evening wore on, Laura and Zoe talked about their hopes and dreams for the future. They discussed the possibility of starting a support group for other trans individuals and their partners, wanting to share the love and acceptance they'd found with others who might be struggling.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!